It's getting more and more important that with all this refurb money we have and years of neglect we have suffered during those decades. So it's important that we to hold W11 and RBKC accountable. And if you have any questions, any complaint, put it through to James tonight. And if you're not satisfied with his response, please make sure you put it in writing, CC us in. It's important. We are at the point in our estate's history that we can make a lot of changes, but still we witness that culture time to time that we have to fight for a lot of things that we deserve to get as part of our services. So yes, please put your questions through.
Thank you, Abbas. James, are you there? Would you like to come in?
Yeah, I'd love to. My camera's not working though. The host has stopped my camera.
Oh no, bear with. Try now.
There we go. Hello, good evening.
Thank you for joining, James.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Abbas. I couldn't agree more. So I'd like to start really to wish you all a good evening and thank the RA for this invitation for our third one of these sessions. I'd also like to wish all of our residents a Ramadan Mubarak for those observing the month. And it's great to see so many of you joining us tonight once again to ask your questions. As always, I've no idea what they are, so I'll do my best to answer them as fully as I can when we get to them. Before I do, as David says, I'll give a short update on progress that's been made since we last met a couple of months ago. A lot's happened. And I want to start with funding news. So many of you will be aware now that we've secured some additional pots of funding. In sum, what that means is in the last 6 months, we've secured over £50 million of additional funding for Lancaster West to become a carbon neutral estate and a model estate for the 21st century. As Abbas says, we're at a historic point in the estate's history and looking forwards its future. So most recently, £19.4 million worth of additional funding has been secured from the UK government's Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. That's specifically for Hurstway Walk, Testerton Walk, Barrington Walk, Moorland House, Talbot Grove House, Camelford Walk, and last but by no means least, Camelford Court. And that will enable us to meet the aspirations of residents in those blocks. We've also secured over £14 million of additional funding. That's from the council for the blocks that I didn't mention, so that across the estate now, we have a significantly increased budget to ensure that every home, every resident on the estate will benefit from a range of energy efficiency measures, including things like triple glazing, high quality insulation, and modern ventilation systems, if residents in those blocks choose to accept them. We've also secured £17.5 million worth of funding for a new district heating system, not just for the estate, but potentially for the wider area as well. And that would be using a range of innovative renewable technologies. I've mentioned before that we've secured £1.6 million worth of funding from the European Union for Treadgold House. We've also secured 3 Green Homes grants for potential green roofs with solar panels for Talbot Walk, Camelford Court and Clarendon Walk, again, if residents choose to accept them. This is on top of the £57.9 million that we'd already secured for kitchens and bathrooms for tenants, a range of improvements, and also including things like CCTV and door entry systems. So this is £50 million of additional funding, and I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank the RA committee, your RA committee, for their hard work, advocacy and support in securing this additional funding. I want to be absolutely clear, we wouldn't be able to do so without them. Turning now to progress of the refurbishment, 27% of all tenanted homes have now benefited from some form of internal refurbishment, and that's up from 11% at the beginning of 2020. So we've made a lot of progress in the last year or so. We're commencing the internal refurbishment programmes for Moorland House, Camborne Mews and Talbot Walk currently, and we've undertaken a range of engagement opportunities with those blocks to answer any questions residents may have. And once again, we'll go as fast as residents wish in those blocks and across the estate, but as slow as we need to. So if you're in those blocks, or when we come to look at the internal refurbishment for other blocks, if now's not the right time for your refurbishment, we can come back in the years ahead. Now, I want to say that I know the way that we manage noise, mess and disturbance remains a concern. And I want to be clear in admitting that we haven't always got it right. But I also want every resident to know that sincerely, we're determined as a team to get it right. And in the weeks and months ahead, as lockdown restrictions hopefully ease, we'll be working with a range of community organisations, the leisure centre, and no doubt residents themselves to ensure that we broaden our offer for every form of respite and welfare and support that our residents might need, undertaking an in situ refurbishment, i.e. a refurbishment to homes to this standard where people are living in them. It makes it all the more difficult and more important that we make the disturbance worth your while. So far, 13 residents have now benefited from our refurbishment decant scheme, and that's where they move to a newly refurbished property permanently away from their current home. That's on top of 40 households now who've benefited from the local lettings plan that we've co-designed with residents 2.5 years ago. Now, in terms of the main block refurbishment, we're in the initial idea stage, and over 100 residents have already participated in a range of webinars and pop-up events, including this afternoon out in front of me in the tea garden for the Walkways, and tomorrow afternoon, if you're in Clarendon Walk, Camelford Walk, Camelford Court or Talbot Walk, I look forward to meeting you then. Finally, in terms of our community development work, I'd like to thank once again the RA for organising their recent vaccine pop-up at the North Kensington Resource Centre, which provided COVID vaccines for over 80 residents of our estate. We'll be investing in the North Kensington Resource Centre in the weeks and months ahead, so hopefully in the summer that will be a more enjoyable place for residents and community groups to use. We've already seen the installation of the first green walls of any estate in the borough by NKRC. We've also installed a couple of meadows and green spaces, and we look forward to working with residents who have been approaching us with ideas. Many of you have secured funding as well to improve the green spaces on the estate. Now, we've generated so far £1.4 million worth of social value for Lancaster West in terms of jobs, grants and training opportunities. Moving forwards, we'll be ramping up our efforts, working with the consultants and contractors that you will help us to procure to make sure that an investment in the bricks and mortar of Lancaster West is also an investment in the people that live here. We'll be working with residents as well on a neighbourhood master plan, developing a vision for the area in 2030. We think it's really important not just to look at the housing, but to look at what it's like to live here, and more importantly, how you would like it to be to live here later in the decade. So I'll stop there, and I'm really looking forward to answering your questions. Back to David, thank you.
Thanks a lot, James. We do have some questions that have come in before the meeting started. I'll just go through those with you. Question number one is, what is happening concerning the empty small space area in Camelford Walk locked by a gate to be turned into a private garden, grey to green? I think this is above where the chimney is, above the power plant. The second question is, why has the Lanc West people changed their minds about installing a lift in the middle section of a stairway of Camelford Walk? Sorry.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of the area above what we call LW3, so the district heating plant, the gas boilers, if you like, on Clarendon Road, one of our residents has secured, I believe it's in order of around £10,000 through the Neighbourhood Community Infrastructure Levy to invest in a Camelford city garden, if you like. So that space there is currently locked. It's not accessible by residents. It's not used by staff either. And what we're looking to do is, certainly in the later spring and summer, is provide a garden space there, primarily, of course, for the residents of Camelford Walk, Interestingly, even today, a resident from the block came over to look at the walkways pop up this side and has already been recruited by Herb Robert, as many of you will know, to work with him and the residents of Block Rex in Camelford Walk to make that happen. So that will become a space, a community garden, if you like, for residents to enjoy, particularly through the summer. I think it will be very much a sun trap as well. So we'll see if we can bring some sort of holiday type furniture in as well, so that residents can benefit that as a bit of respite as well from any noise in the block as the years ahead. In terms of the lifts, I'm not aware that a decision has been made to rule out a lift in the middle stairwell. We're at the initial design ideas stage of the detailed design stage. We'll move into the emergency choices and preferences stage once we've received feedback from residents. So now it sounds like this particular resident thinks that a lift should be put in the middle of the block. So let's be clear, across the estate, we have one lifted block at the moment, which is Treadgold House. We are absolutely committed. We've got the funding for lifts for Clarendon Walk, Camelford Walk and Talbot Walk. I believe for Talbot Walk especially, even though it's a smaller block, lifts was one of the top 10 things that residents would like to see. So we'll be sharing tomorrow and beyond the ideas that we might have. When you install a lift, it's a significant amount of investment. You have to consider all sorts of other things in terms of access, in terms of lighting, in terms of fire safety. And so we are a very long way around agreeing exactly where the lift will go. And if residents on the whole would like to see a lift in the middle of the block, and that is technically feasible, makes sense, and I see no reason why we can't make that happen. So to answer the question directly, no decision has been made not to put a lift there, and in fact we remain committed to making sure that those 3 blocks have flat level access, at least to people's front doors.
That's great. Thank you, James. The next question, I believe, comes from a resident in the Walkways, and it's around rubbish and bulk items being left. It says rubbish bulk items are left during weekend near the rubbish chute area and the main entrance. What is the solution that the refurbishment will bring to this problem? And just a comment that, rubbish bags are left near the rubbish chutes. So more kind of refuse solutions are required. And also a comment of more bicycle hangers as well. I've also had another resident mention that we need some more bike hangers, especially towards the 300s of the walkways.
Fantastic. Yeah, 2 good questions. Both, again, issues that are on my radar and on the design team's radar as well. I'm well aware of the sensitivities around rubbish and the need to immediately replace, following the tragedy, the current bin chute hoppers, and at that time very few compliant fire safe hoppers could be installed, so the hoppers that were put in were much smaller than people were used to. So we've now got an opportunity to think far more holistically around our waste strategy, and really work with what residents would ideally like. So if residents would rather have outside recycling centres and more of them, larger, rather than bin chutes, that's something we look at. Equally, if residents really want the bin chutes and they want us to look at a way to increase the size of the hoppers, that's something we can work with as well. So no decision has been made either way. I think in terms of doing something, so we had a discussion yesterday actually about a couple of estates, so one's in East London, one's in Cambridge, and where they've essentially provided sort of an underground waste collection system. So above ground, you don't have bins per se, you don't see rubbish and bulk and what have you, everything drops below and then it's collected. Now, for something like that, we could look at something like that, certainly for the walkways, maybe for Clarendon and Camelford and Talbot potentially, but obviously you're talking quite a lot of investment that would be required for something like that. So I think what we'll be doing in netball, what we've already been doing, what we'll be doing certainly over the next few weeks, is collecting people's sense of what they would like to see. In terms of the bulk refuse, I know we still have 5% of the estate remains overcrowded. So I know spaces at a premium, especially at the moment, everyone's in. People want to keep their stuff outside in the walkways, but obviously because of fire risk in the event of a fire and people tripping over it and things like that, we do need people to keep things inside and keep their balconies clear. Now, what we are doing on the walkways in the next month or so is we're increasing the provision of recycling bins. So you'll see some new bins arriving soon. We're introducing the first food waste composting collection scheme on an estate in the borough. So that will be something as well for the 3 walkways on this side of the estate we'll be able to benefit from. So hopefully that will ease the burden in terms of people just dumping their rubbish. We're also looking at bringing in what we call a yellow card and red card system. So we're going through rubbish now, because it's the same minority residents who think that it's okay just to dump their rubbish, and that impacts the majority of residents as well. So we're looking also at potentially recharging residents if there's a cost to that, because there is, and that's a cost that is met by tenants and leaseholders when people do dump bulk rubbish. We know we've had an issue historically over people coming off the estate and dumping rubbish because they know that, or they assume that the council's a soft touch, and we've used mobile CCTV to tackle that, and we've managed to enforce, working with colleagues in the town hall on that as well. In terms of bicycles, so I remember when we secured the first bicycle hangers, I think we have over 50 bicycle hanger spaces, if you like. They're all free to our residents. I think absolutely we would be looking as part of the refurbishment, once we've got the basics decided and agreed, and we've understood from residents what they would like to see. I really think that increasing cycle storage provision, but also in things like cycle lanes. I mean, there's been a lot of talk through the pandemic of what they call modal filters, where you turn roads not into primarily for cars, but for cyclists and pedestrians. Now, I think we're a long way away from that because of all the vehicles that we have to bring to the estate for the refurbishment. But I think there's a much bigger discussion to be had around what does carbon neutrality mean in 2030, you know, for residents who live here, and making it a cycle-friendly estate and a place where people are happy to, you know, store their bike, they feel it's safe, and equally they feel it's safe on the roads around. So I think you're pushing an open door in terms of asking for more cycle storage, and yet we keep looking for opportunities to introduce it.
Thank you, James. The next set of questions, there's a bit of a theme. They're from leaseholders, and it's around the leaseholder charge, which, as you can imagine, is quite a big topic for them. Please, can we have an update on the leaseholder costs, both resident and non-resident, as part 1. Service charges for leaseholders are currently extortionately high. Items such as lifts, giving green roofs, photovoltaic are all expensive to maintain. Will these not further increase service charges for leaseholders? And then finally, there has been a lot of talk about pots of funding and recharging to leaseholders, much of which to me is ambiguous and appears that the door has been left open for unspecified charges down the line. Please state in clear terms what leaseholders are likely to be charged for.
Right. Okay, so I've talked about the additional £50 million worth of funding that we've secured. So before we did that, the reality for leaseholders was that if you're a resident leaseholder at the time of the tragedy, including if you were a shared owner, we would only pass on just under 46%, if you like, of the overall charges, up to a cap of £15,000 over a 5-year period. So the most you would be charged as a resident leaseholder is £15,000. If you're a non-resident leaseholder, there would be no cap on that. For both resident and non-resident leaseholders, there's a range of payment plans in place from 3 years to 10 years, some interest-free, some with interest. There's also opportunities for you to put a charge on your property, so you haven't got the cash, but you've got the equity. So there's a range of flexibility that was there already. Now, in terms of the different pots of funding, so in terms of that last question, I'm afraid there isn't a straightforward answer to this. But what I would say, on the whole, the additional funding is good news for leaseholders, and that's for 2 primary reasons. The first is that a condition of the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund is that no element of any of the project's scope can be recharged to any leaseholder. So what does that mean in practical terms? So for the 3 walkways, Moorland Tower Grove House, for Camelford Court and Walk, you're effectively as a leaseholder going to get windows without any charge, 0 charge basically. There will be no charge to them whatsoever. For any other elements that residents choose to be in scope, so it could be forms of wall insulation, roof insulation, mechanical ventilation with heat recovery. Equally, there would be no charge at all, whether you're a resident or a non-resident leaseholder. Now, there would still be charges for elements of the building improvements that sat outside of those projects. So CCTV, door entry systems are 2 aspects that won't sit inside that social housing decarbonisation fund scope. The second way that there's a benefit to leaseholders is in terms of the council's, if you like, match funding for blocks like Verity, Camborne, Talbot and Clarendon, Talbot Walk and Clarendon Walk. So there, where the council has invested that money to meet the ambition and meet residents' expectations of carbon neutrality by 2030, we didn't want to leave some blocks at a very high standard and others, if you like, at a low standard. So whilst at the moment, what we would be doing is recharging for double glazing, up to double glazing, because the difference between double and triple glazing would not be seen as a like-for-like repair currently. We will not be charging the difference. So the good news for residents in those blocks, and that again would be non-resident as well as resident leaseholders and shared owners, is you would be getting triple glazed windows for the price of double, effectively. That's how things stand at the moment. Now, I know the Residents Association understandably have brought this issue up because what we've now got is an increasingly complex matrix, if you like, depending on where you live and where the sources of funding came from. Depends on what that charge might be. That is something which we have agreed as a council to look at and share that analysis with the Residents Association and with our leaseholders. But if I can just say that on the whole, we make a commitment that no leaseholder, no resident leaseholder will be in a position of financial hardship as a result of the work. So we're really clear on that. I realise it's easy for me to say it, but given where we are and why we're here, that actions speak louder than words. There will be no bills for leaseholders in terms of major works this year, and we'll probably at the earliest be looking at middle onwards of next year, to be honest with you. So I can't give a simple answer on that one, but it is good news. The additional funding is good news for leaseholders, very good news for leaseholders. So it would mean in the walkways, leaseholders who previously were thinking I could face a £15,000 bill if you're a resident leaseholder, will now be looking at probably around a third of that. To be honest with you, depending on what residents would like to see us do. Now, the second question is an interesting one because it's about the service charges, if you like, of some of this investment. So lifts is a good example. So if we install a lift in, let's say, Camelford Walk, that came up earlier, the cost of the lift is an improvement and therefore it will not be charged. The maintenance cost of the lift, which might be around up to £50 a year per household, something like that, for a size of Camelford Walk, sounds about right. That would be charged. And at the end of the life of the lifts, so maybe 25 years, 30 years, that again would be something that would be recharged. So the investment that we're benefiting residents with, it's not. I'm not going to be untruthful and say there is no charge at all for any of this. But for leaseholders especially, the impact in terms of the equity, the value of your properties going up, the quality of life. If you're a non-resident leaseholder and you're looking to look at your private rent, that's likely to be something that you could increase if that's the way you're looking at it. But more crucially for the people that live here, it means people will be able to come in and out of their homes. It'll be a more pleasant place to live. People can stay in their community rather than look to move away. And what I would say with service charges generally is, in my experience, given the legacy here in terms of the previous management, there will be things that leaseholders are charged for and are probably too high. So the inefficiency of the heating and hot water system is the obvious one. There will be things that aren't being charged for, which sort of should be. I think if you look at the envelope of the service charges, I can't see that any of the elements that we're looking to put in will leave leaseholders worse off. In terms of green roofs, they bring insulation benefits to reduce your energy bills. So we may well need to spend, I don't know, £20 a year each to maintain them, but you will benefit in other ways. Similarly, in terms of solar panels and PV, they will generate electricity, which will benefit the estate and the homes you live in and the blocks you live in. And things like energy efficient, light sensitive communal lights will mean, again, you're not paying, as we are at the moment, for lights to be on all day when it's in the middle of the day. So I think in the round, yes, there will be some charges for some of these improvements, but I'm really confident that leaseholders will be in a much better position in terms of their yearly service charge. And there is no question that every leaseholder will be much better off in terms of the value of their homes.
Thank you, James. Obviously, cost is a big issue for leaseholders. When is it likely that you'll be able to give some indicative costs for leaseholders in their respective blocks about the actual charges for any recharges for the works, but also any kind of an indication? I know it's going to be too early now, but when would you be able to give an indication of what likely service charges there would be? Yeah,
so we can have a bit of a rough and ready guess at it. I think one of the first things I'd say, which is probably not a cop-out per se, but it's probably lets me off the hook a little bit, is a lot of it will depend on what residents would like us to do. So, you know, if residents turn around and say, for example, we don't want lifts, then we're not going to install them. Simple as that. Equally, I think we can give rough guesstimates, for want of a better phrase, and I've just given you one, in fact, for those of you that live in the walkways. But a lot of it will depend. You know, we've also had the impact of things like Brexit in terms of our supply chains. So that's already disrupted some of the work. So the tiling in Camborne Court, that all got caught up. Our tiles got caught up in Italy. So if it was something we needed to just do straight away, something, you know, that had to be done there and then, unlike tiling, which was, you know, an aesthetic improvement primarily, we would have to buy whatever we could here. That might drive prices up. I think certainly in the next 3 months, we'll have an idea of what's in scope. We have quantity surveyors working with the 3 design teams, and they're absolutely providing those sorts of ballpark figures. I think in about 6 months' time, we'll start having conversations with the market in terms of the contractors, and we'll have a much better idea of what we're looking at in terms of costs. So we have got people moving, buying, selling on the estate, and when that happens, we are as a landlord required to make sure that we give an indication of costs. But in terms of down to the individual level, and it depends, when did you move here? Were you here at the time of the tragedy? Are you resident, non-resident? All that sort of stuff. It's going to be highly personalised, and I think we'll probably be talking about a year from now. I'd be in a place to sort of say this is the sort of thing you're looking at. By then, we'll have agreed the scope of the works, we'll have procured the contractors, we'll have them committed to particular prices, and we'll be able to give plenty of notice before the first invoice lands, if you like, of what those charges might be.
Perfect. Thank you, James. If people do have questions that you'd like to ask, if you want to ask James personally, please raise your hand and I'll be able to bring you into the meeting. Or you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and type in your question there. We'll read that out for James to answer. We've got a question from James Stewart. No, other way around. We've got a question from Stuart James. Go ahead, Stuart.
Hey, James.
Hi, Stuart. How you doing?
I'm all right. I've got 2 questions. Going back to what you've said. So the recycling bins on Verity are always packed. Like there's stuff tipping out of them. Is it possible to source more recycling bins for Verity? Like another big bin? Because we've literally got one, it seems, in the whole estate. A minute. This is my first question. Hello?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it's just one recycling bin, I'm sure sure we can make that happen now, to be honest with you. So let me pick that up, Stuart, and see what we can do. And yeah, moving forwards, I know in the initial sort of design ideas, we've looked at the sort of bin rooms, if I can call them that, by the flats. I think, you know, even when the Verity was built in 1980, you know, the level of waste coming from residential dwellings is far less than it is now, especially at the moment, you know, because people are at home more and all the rest of it. The waste and recycling is definitely an area we're really keen to look at, you know, almost with a blank canvas, really, and maybe moving away from, so you have issues around, aside from fire safety with chutes, but pests, smells, you know, some people feel unsafe opening bin sheds and so on. So more sort of well-lit, sort of centralised recycling centres, that's an option. So yeah, I'll absolutely look at the recycling bin as soon as possible. And in terms of that waste and recycling discussion, that can be picked up as part of the ongoing conversation we're having around refurbishment.
Okay, and my second question is, because I've been helping out a leaseholder get information because I wasn't up to speed with it, but it does seem kind of unfair to us on Verity and the other blocks that weren't in the initial pots, where you've got leaseholders on the walkways getting their windows for free, but yet Verity are going to be charged a whatever it is, especially considering that the windows, the double glazing windows that were put in, weren't fitted correctly originally.
Yeah, so the third bit of good news, which I didn't mention, is for that reason, the fact that the windows in Verity are double glazed, the same as Treadgold and Camborne Mews. When we come to replace them, we won't be able to charge for those elements either. So leaseholders in Verity Close, leaseholders in flats in Verity Close, because that's where we're required to replace them, you will also be benefiting from triple glazed windows, and you will face no charge. So apologies, I missed that from the earlier response. However, for other things, they might be charged where, quite right, it might not be. So this is, you can see the complexity, and with Verity Close, we've got freeholders and leasehold houses as well. So what we're building is this massive matrix, as you can imagine, which will sit down with the RA to sense check, does this make sense? And then we can use that to try and inform leaseholders as we move along. So yeah, so I realise that and I know leaseholders are keen to say how much I'm going to be charged. What I don't want to do is reassure where I can't, or equally alarm someone where I don't need to.
Will we have a rough draft? How long will it take to have a rough draft with that matrix, James? Sorry, I didn't actually hear the time frame on that.
Yeah, so that should be ready to share with the RA in the next 2 weeks. So we're talking quite quickly as a first draft, and then, you know, we'll sense check that, and I think we can use that as a bit of a tool, because although we don't know the price and we don't know the scope of the works, it depends on what residents choose for us to do. We can be really clear that if you do choose this, are you going to be charged yes or no? So it will at least help to provide a little bit of clarity as much as we're able to.
All right, cheers, James.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. Next, we've got Carl. Go ahead, Carl.
You're on mute, Carl. Unlike you.
Yes. Oh. What do you see?
Go ahead, Carl. We can hear you now.
Pet. You see my little pet rather than me. Isn't that sad? That's my little dwarf hamster. Where's my face? My question was, no, come on, something gone wrong here. Well, I'm a newcomer to this exotic webinar, Zoom webinar it's called. I'm an absolute newcomer. And there's my little dwarf hamster masquerading as me. He has no questions to ask because he's well looked after. However, I have questions. Can you hear me?
I can, Carl, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can't. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Well, it would appear that my dwarf hamster is masquerading as me for the time being. My question is, as I have said in my question, why are the leaseholders charged more for the service, exactly the same services that are provided and we pay for or should pay for? There seems to be a disparity between what the leaseholders pay and what we pay, the tenants. Why is the disparity?
Yes, you're quite right. There is a disparity. Those sorts of disparities are not unusual, but it is certainly the ambition to get to a place where there is parity between tenants and leaseholders in terms of the elements that are paid for. I think given the context that we're in, there's lots of charges which we've not passed on to both leaseholders and tenants because of where we are and what's happened and the sorts of services that are required in terms of getting the estate to an improved standard. So things like window cleaning, for example, which a number of residents say, you know, they've never seen and now we're bringing it in and so on.
Yes, yes, quite.
So there are some anomalies, you're quite right.
Yes, you see. Yeah, I'm sad you see only my hamster rather than me. Perhaps that's much better. Go ahead. Whoever is twiddling the knobs, I think it's better to see my little dwarf hamster than me as myself. Please change it. Switch over, please. No?
I think you need to do that. Carl, I'm afraid I don't have access to any of the knobs, however that will.
Oh, there's somebody else.
But you're quite right, that's being looked at. That's definitely something the Vice Chair of the Residents Association has raised with my good colleague Jana Depries, the Head of Home Ownership Services. So that is being looked at because that is one of the various anomalies that we have here on the estate. And you're quite right, we want to move to a place where service charges are affordable to all and fair and transparent.
And my next question is, what is the legal status of Camborne Mews? Because it has always been regarded as an annex to Lancaster West, because it was built for a different purpose by different people. What is the situation at the moment? Because we are all of the opinion that what the heart doesn't see, the eye doesn't grieve, or maybe the other way around.
Oh, I am. Camborne Mews residents have often felt like an afterthought.
Yes.
I know yourself and I routinely exchange emails at least once a week. And I know a number of the team in terms of Robert, Christian, Dowd are often over there working with you.
Yes, they are absolutely right.
I thank you for stepping up to be a block rep for Camborne Mews, which I think will help. And we've done a block reps review. We've now got block reps for every single block other than Camelford Court. If there's someone from Camelford Court here, be interested in a block rep. So, you know,
well, that's a big place, isn't it? That's a big place. Why don't you have a rep from there?
You ask the residents of Camelford Court, absolutely.
Exactly. Exactly.
We'll work with you, Carl, and your neighbours to carry on having the conversation we're having. I can't guarantee we'll get everything right straight away, but we're here to listen, and we'll continue working so that Camborne Mews feels as much a part of the estate as any other block.
I appreciate the difficulties and the constraints. I worked for the central government for some years, so I know what kind of difficulties you may have.
Thank you, Carl.
I have no further questions. Please move on.
Thank you very much, Carl.
And the hamster.
And the hamster. Next, we've got David from the Residents Association. Vice Chair, you wanted to come in and add regarding the leaseholder charges. David?
Thanks, David. Yes, I'm afraid I can't upstage Carl's hamster, but I'd just like to say, James, we don't really want to have to pay for
or any of these improvements as resident leaseholders. And I'd just like to say that we will be continuously asking the council to waive what are now quite clearly ridiculous charges, because they're going to be different depending on what block you live in, depending on. I think the whole case for recharging doesn't hold a lot of water, certainly not for the resident leaseholders. There's never really been a moral case to recharge people who lived through what happened with the fire and the aftermath of the fire for improvements when no one else on the estate will be paying for them. I'm really glad we got the money. I'm really glad we worked with you to secure the money. But I think the council need to go back and look at what's happening with the charging and find a way to make sure that resident leaseholders don't have to pay, because it's so manifestly unfair now that some people will be paying, and maybe a buy-to-let landlord who's never lived on the estate and doesn't have much interest will not be paying, and yet other people who've lived in their homes and lived here all their lives will face a bill. So it was to state that, James, and it was also to say that I think also that it's long overdue to have a proper review of the service charges, certainly for the walkways where they don't seem to make much sense and where the bills are so difficult to understand and are quite random. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to work, or we'll be able to work with you to look at everyone's leaseholder charges on the estate and have a proper review of them, because I mean, this has gone on for 3 years post-fire. It's all, I understand there've been a lot of additional costs which you haven't charged to leaseholders, but it still seems we're paying more money every year for the same services, or in most cases, far, far worse services, including the heating, especially the heating. So yeah, it's just to say that I hope you'll be happy to go and keep on looking at all of these issues, because they haven't gone away.
Thank you, David. Yeah, two good points, and of course, I think you know, morally, I couldn't disagree with a word you've said, to be honest with you. Obviously, in terms of the leasehold charges, there is a legal driver there. There's a fiduciary duty on the council and me as a council officer. We've heard all these discussions before, but just for those who might not have, we've got a £300 million capital programme across the borough. So we've got leaseholder charges at Silchester, at Henry Dickens, and so on. We need to make sure that we aren't challenged in terms of what they call fettering discretion without basis. So whatever we do with regard to leaseholders, whatever I may think, if you like, morally, and I'm quite open about, I think, a lot of what we need to do here, it needs a moral driver, but that needs to be within the confines of what we can do legally. So as we've agreed already, we're going to produce that matrix. We're going to explore what that looks like, and you have my commitment that I'm more than happy to continue having that conversation until that point is exhausted. It's certainly not the intention of the council or the neighbourhood team to come across as avaricious, but the reality is, if we don't charge for elements that we should be, legally speaking, then that, if you like, reduces the pot left for the estate as a whole. Now, that said, we're now secured over £100 million worth of funding. So that aspect of things becomes less of an issue. And obviously, given we can't charge, as you say, the buy-to-let landlord for their, you know, potentially £25,000 worth of windows, if you've got a 3 bed in the walkways, there is absolutely an anomaly there which goes in the wrong direction, in my view, from a moral perspective. So whilst I agree with you from that point of view, we need to look at what's legally possible, and you have my commitment to carry on doing that internally within the council. And in terms of the service charge reviews, I'll drop Jana a note to see if we can expedite that. We are looking through the heat network engagement we're doing at those anomalies to try and understand them, try and unpick them. The heating and hot water, if you believe it or not, remains subsidised on Lancaster West. So given the size of the bills that you leaseholders are currently receiving, you can imagine what the overall cost is like, and hence why, in terms of the heat network proposals we're looking at, we're hoping that will be cheaper for the council and in turn cheaper for residents as well.
Thank you, James. The next question we've got is, will there be new flooring in Camelford Walk near the stairways and all flooring on the estate? So I'm guessing they'll be part as part of the stairways within the blocks.
Yeah, so in terms of the internal communal areas, absolutely. So typically with an in-situ refurbishment, you would do the common areas last because of the amount of building work you're doing before you get to that. It will very much depend, because some of the options we're looking is around structural changes to the building. There are various options there. We've got to check whether some of them are affordable before we share them with residents. To be honest, they're not required. They are potentially more disruptive as well. So the likelihood is we will look to work within the current configurations, albeit with improvements such as lifts, improved lighting and entrances and so on. So yes, absolutely, we'd be looking at doing the common areas in terms of flooring, lighting, the walls, the ceilings, looking to weatherproof certainly that entrance on the west side of Camelford Walk that gets hammered with the rain, dealing with that. So you haven't got the ponding and the ice at the end of the stairs. And that's something that would be the same across the board, to be honest with you, in terms of the common areas. And I'm just glad that we're in a place now we can take away that element of doubt of whether we can afford certain elements. At one point, we took to this gold, silver, bronze approach, and we had enough funding for a bit better than bronze, but not quite silver. Now we're silver to gold, bluntly, within reason. And often things cost more than one anticipates. But moving forward, I'm quite confident we'll absolutely be able to improve the look and feel of the common areas, provide blanket CCTV coverage internally for those blocks that would like that. And I know Camelford Walk, there's been some ASB and bluntly criminality as well to deal with. So I'm really looking forward to making or transforming the look and feel of the common areas of the blocks. In terms of the outside, I'm not quite sure I was referring to that. So the landscaping and things like that, we've got some pots of funding for garden areas. We haven't at this stage got enough funding to look at things like paving, brickwork and so on and so forth. But down the line, I think the momentum, mainly the result of residents and the RA especially, that is being built on this estate is phenomenal. When I started, you know, that 2.5 years ago, we had £30 million. We're now north of 100 million. There's not a day where we're not looking at other opportunities to secure investment for this estate and working with residents to do so. So I think if we build on that positivity and momentum, I'm quite confident that we can get Lancaster West to, you know, to transform us as far as you want it to. If that includes the wider area, then I'm confident we'll do that in the fullness of time.
Thanks for that, James. And following on from that, I understand there is an estate improvement budget that Lancaster West has. Would you be able to give residents a brief idea of what that is, what that covers, what projects were undertaken in the last year, and if there's anything in the pipeline for the upcoming year, and how residents can get in touch if they have any ideas for improvements that they would like to see?
Fantastic. Yeah, happy to, David. So the estate improvement budget is an amount of money that is sort of bid for or granted every year, borough-wide, depending on the size of the estate in our case. So we've just secured this week, funnily enough, an additional £50,000 for this year. Last year, because of years of historic underspend, we had £182,000 to invest, and we did a campaign there to seek ideas from residents in terms of what they would like to see. The only thing we've done post Grenfell in terms of investing is the More Ball Games pen adjacent to Talbot Walk and Talbot Grove House. So that cost about just under £60,000, I think, to do that root and branch, and it's the little playground next to it as well. In the last year, which has been a strange year, as you can imagine, we have undertaken and completed 2 projects using the estate improvement budget, or 3 actually, I suppose. The first project was the Teston Walk 400s entrance garden. So you'll remember there was a bit of a sort of neglected sort of landing. So it's the roof of the North Kensington Resource Centre. We co-designed the actual design with residents. We also co-designed the plants that were going to go in there, as well as even the colour of the planters and I think we held a vote in terms of that. So that was co-designed with residents. The second thing, which is a match funding effort, really. So the Residents Association Committee successfully secured £19,500 for the green wall, which is now green walls, plural, which are now adorned around the courtyard of the North Kensington Resource Centre next to Chesterton Walk. When we were exploring together different options, it was clear that with some additional funding, we could do all of the walls plus a meadow wall. So we topped that up through the estate improvement budget as well. And the last and most recent project, again, that's on the Walkways, has been along Bramley Road at Hurstway Walk. A resident there raised a suggestion that we try and create a green screen. Now, the balance for all of the work that we do is because of refurbishment, which will involve scaffolding and all the rest of it is coming, we have to make sure, or we try and make sure, that any investment is not going to be, you know, abortive, I should say, in the sense that it will be ruined and destroyed as part of the refurbishment. So what we felt was a balance there was to install the jasmine plants, which are now there along Bramley Road. It's those who haven't been along there, which in the summer will come to bloom. Similar to Carl and his hamster earlier, we did something at Camborne Mews to a similar effect in terms of the jasmine over that side. So there's 3 projects, clearly over one side of the estate rather than the other. Not a conscious decision. I think given the year that people have had, lots of people have been focused on, you know, what do we do with outdoor spaces. But with that £50,000, we're back up again to about that 180,000 that we go into the new financial year with. We've recruited a new head of community development, engagement and partnerships, Nordine Fahmy, who starts on the 3rd of June. He replaces Desmond Zephyr, who many of you will know and love, because he was here on the night of the tragedy and stayed with us since he's moved on to a new role in the NHS, and we thank him and wish him all the well. But I think once Nordine's started with us, I can see that we'll be ramping up our efforts moving forwards and working with residents on all your ideas as the summer unravels.
Thanks, James. One theme of questions that's coming through is regarding windows. 2 blocks have been specifically called out, Upper Camelford Walk and Clarendon Walk, Upper Clarendon Walk. When can residents expect to see kind of decisions being made around the windows, or what's going to be the process for getting that done?
Yeah, so one of the things which, for those that came to the Walkways pop-up today, you would have seen we've had our first samples of triple glazed windows. We've got triple glazed windows now in the Verity Close low energy council home. We're going to be launching that publicly in the next, or certainly by the end of April. So that's something to look out for, because there's lots of choices that we need to make. But I think windows is one of the things which we could probably quite quickly lock into the design, as an architect would say. And I think with the 2 blocks mentioned, we've got the pop-ups tomorrow, so do come along if you're in those blocks and give your views on the windows. And as soon as we can make a decision, we can look at, can we bring forward a windows programme to get them going. There is a need to look at things fairly holistically, but that said, the sooner we all agree, I say all, residents agree in terms of what's technically possible, the sooner we can factor in a programme. I don't want to give a commitment to a hard date, because everything that we've done, particularly here, because it's for the first time, has taken longer than we envisaged. So even the green PV roof we're looking at Camford Court is taking longer than we anticipated. But I would very much like to see that somewhere on this estate we've got triple glazed windows going into A block by the end of this calendar year. If that's more than that, then fantastic. But I wouldn't want to give a hard commitment in terms of times, because I'm not in a position to deliver that at this stage, because there are so many things that are uncertain. We're still waiting for volunteers on a few of the structural surveys as well, because of course when we've got the scaffolding up for the windows, we want to be doing the roof as well. Otherwise we've got to pay for it twice, and that's your budget, so that's going to be less stuff, less investment for the estate. Also, I think because we've done the low energy home at Verity Close, I would have thought that Verity would be the obvious candidate to get going sooner rather than later, particularly the houses. And we're looking at a number of pilot properties across the estate, similar to what we've got with Verity Close, similar to the open houses, which hundreds of residents came to across all the blocks on the estate. But looking not just at the kitchens and bathrooms and internal decor this time, looking at the windows, the ventilation systems, the installation, and so on.
That's great, thank you. Next, we have a live question from Daniel. Over to you, Daniel.
Cool. Okay. Thank you very much. And James, really appreciate this. It's really super helpful and very informative. I think you touched on it earlier, but in terms of the outside spaces, has that been awarded as part of the lots to the architectural firms that are given the sort of principal design brief for the various blocks, or is that totally separate? And are there any plans for the kind of the playground area and the grassy space that's in the middle of the estate?
Thanks, Daniel. Good to see you, and a great question. So at the time when we were procuring the design teams, we only had, at the beginning, we only had £30 million. However, we have written the tenders and procured design teams in mind that should we be in the place we are now, having secured additional funding, we can broaden the scope. So we're currently in discussions with them to do exactly that. And there is no reason why that would exclude landscape architectural type services. So interestingly, so that's, if you like, what's going on at the design team level for the blocks. Interestingly, through some of the community development work, which a number of you have been working with Hibbo Yusuf and Kader Ibrahim on, and Des, of course, before he moved on, in terms of grant bids, we've been working with a range of different organisations, including people like Hubbub, who bring landscape architectural skills as well. We've secured funding for a range of our garden areas, and we are currently bidding for and negotiating for investment in the playground area that you mentioned, the so-called baby park at Talbot Grove House, and also the playground over here between Hurst Way and Chesterton Walk. And I know that's something the RA are heavily advocating for. So I think what we'll end up with is sort of working from the inside out in terms of the buildings. We'll carry on obviously on our fundraising drive. I don't think we'll ever stop as long as we can make sure that it's needed and demonstrate the need and benefit to it, not just the residents here, but to the wider area. We'll continue to do that. And we'll also have these pepper potted improvements. And the same way with the sports pen, you know, that is now fit for purpose for another sort of 20, 25 years, that should last, compared to what it was before. So it's certainly not the case that we're saying let's just focus on the buildings and that's it. But it's equally not the case that at the moment, to answer your question, a significant amount of outside space is in scope, because at the moment it isn't. But I would absolutely envisage that in the fullness of time, that's exactly the sorts of things we're looking at. Also, as we, if you like, attract inward investment from the wider council, so in terms of the Grenfell Nursery development, which will hopefully be delivered by September, that will bring some improvements to the immediate area in terms of the aesthetics as well. And so similarly, I think what we're trying to do and will do through the neighbourhood master planning work we'll do with you all is to try and develop a bit more of a holistic approach. If there's one thing which I don't think it looks like has ever been in place here, is that joined up between housing, you know, schools, parks, and so on.
Yeah.
That's something we want to bring.
And I guess that will be the thing, because the sort of the area in the centre, it's between a number of blocks. So the consultation in respect of the sort of works for each block has been fantastic, because most of the sort of people that are resident in a particular block have the same concerns and the same sort of, you know, things that they want improved. But that communal space in the centre probably needs consultation from everyone that borders on that communal space, or just the entire estate, I guess.
Absolutely, and it'll be my job to broker that mediation, I imagine, at the time. I look forward to it.
Good luck, James. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Next, Abbas, the chair of the RA, has a question. Abbas,
Yes.
do you want to come and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. I think the amount of investment we have for our estate is once in a lifetime for any council estate, probably for whole United Kingdom. I doubt that any other estate will be able to secure that much of investment, and proudly on behalf of residents, we played active role in securing that with W11. I think that shouldn't distract us and W11 from day-to-day issues we have with the repairs. I think with the resources W11 have, I don't think the level of repairs and dealing with some of the issues are adequate enough. And sometimes there are massive delays. For example, sorting out the chute bins in the east side. It shouldn't be us all the time chasing it. It needs, to me, it should be sorted within 1 month. It's not a science rocket. For example, putting that gate for that one property, James knows which one I'm talking about. Again, we have to bring it up time and time. And also, for example, asking contractors to clean up after they finish the job in the voids. Still a lot of corridors is full of dust when they leave. So, you know, and these are, there are a lot more examples, but I think, you know, with the resources and teams you have, you need to make sure they deal with it without making us to come to you and you go to them and make them to do it.
Yeah, thanks, Abbas. Fair feedback, which I won't disagree with. I think I've always been clear from the beginning that we're not going to get to where I certainly want the team to get to in the short term or even medium term. We started our DLO, I think it was on the 8th of July 2018. Since then, we've undertaken around 6,500 repairs. When we started, about half of the repairs we could do in-house, and half were contracted out. Now it's just under 90% are done in-house. So we've recruited resident operatives. We've now recruited a permanent team, more or less, or people on fixed-term contracts. So we've got that stability now. I think the examples that you've given, so bin chutes and the gate that you described, are two examples of where we're reliant on a broader contractor. So to some extent, we're at the mercy of the state of the UK building industry. And what I'm keen to do, and working closely with Louise Graham, my Assistant Neighbourhood Director, and Joe Reid, our repairs manager, to invest in the skills and also in terms of the plant and equipment so we can do more things in-house. Now, I think the separate bit that you mentioned there, which again is something we talk about time and time again within the team, is one of, bluntly, making the customer do the work, is how I describe it. So rather than us proactively saying there's been a delay, I'm going to let a resident know, because of everything that's going on, something else happens and that doesn't happen, the resident phones up, emails, or it escalates to me and all this sort of thing. So I'm more than aware that we are nowhere near, I'm going to be absolutely clear, we're nowhere near a model 21st century repair service. However, the progress that we've made, in my opinion at least, in the last couple of years, I think will increasingly be built upon. I think in terms of now we've got the stability, you know, of a permanent team. We haven't got the staff changes that, you know, inevitably happen when you bring in a lot of temporary staff. I'm quite confident we'll work with the residents to improve and be in a far more proactive place than we have been. We're doing some analysis at the moment, as many organisations do at the start of the financial year, about how we performed the last year and set some targets for the year ahead. So the first year of the repairs team, satisfaction's gone from around sort of 60%, which is abysmal in UK terms, up to around 80%, which is just below average. We're just over 80%, so we've gone up a little bit in the last year. Our turnaround remains probably, on average, one of the quickest in the country. I'd probably say the top 5%. I'm quite confident about nailing my colours to the mast in terms of that. So we're very quick, but the customer journey is not where it needs to be. So 9 times out of 10, we'll turn up on time and we'll get the job done. But then that 1 time out of 10, as you've described, the customer has to keep reminding us, or the contractor lets us down and we don't let someone know, and all this sort of thing. And I can assure you that there's regular discussions going on to capture that resident feedback. I've got here, in fact, some analysis of what you've told us through our neighbourhood strategy. And I think if there's one thing that will help us to improve, it's our residents. Because the levels of engagement when we undertake a survey are far beyond anything I've ever experienced in my career. We get levels of engagement in numbers that previously I've only had on a borough-wide level. So I want to thank every resident who's taken their time to feed back to us. I want to thank every resident who's taken the time to complain, because it's through our complaints that we learn. And rest assured, I have to write and sign off every complaint. So I don't appreciate that my time is being used to fix something basic that's gone wrong. So I just want to sort of assure people that we're not here just to sort of get a job done and keep things ticking over. The challenge I've set is for us to be the best repairs team in the country. And as you said, Abbas, we have the resources to do so. So that's what we will do our best to achieve.
Thanks, James. And regarding the contracts, I mean, there's been a couple of other comments around some of the contacts by the contractors. Is there a way we can address through the internal refurbishment team the kind of the cleanliness, cleaning up after themselves, making sure that noisy works are only done between certain times, not leaving gates to entrances propped open, potentially damaging the entrances, and things like that? Absolutely.
So we've just gone through some procurements for 3 new internal refurbishment contractors. And there are various measures of success, that's from my point of view. The first and foremost is the resident satisfaction. It's no good me turning around a refurbishment of a property very quickly, cheaper the price than we assumed, to a high quality, if the way they do that, is disruptive. And so, alongside the resident satisfaction, we do look at turnaround. In the last week, we have been able to turn around a property 40 days quicker than target. So previously, our quickest refurbishment was 95 days. As of last week, we did one in 50 days, and that's still a long time. But given when we started, we were looking at 150 days, things are going in the right direction. The average cost of the internal refurbishment is also falling as we negotiate new supplies, broaden the range, which allows people to choose what they want, and incidentally happens to include items which are cheaper and leaves more funding in the budget. So I suppose what I'm trying to describe here is there are a range of competing priorities and trade-offs. And I think we've got a much better understanding now in terms of how do we address respite issues. So we've got posters up, we've got a respite brochure, which will, once things open up, which will broaden out. People can come and work here at baseline. We can give temporary respite to any resident. If you're a private resident of a leaseholder and you've got noise above you and you're working from home, we can give you somewhere to work. So we're broadening that out and learning all the time. Yes, I know there will, sadly, incidents happen. Subcontractors will often be used and they won't have been inducted in the way that we would want them to be. So rest assured that remains something, that respite piece remains something that's discussed at least once or twice a week formally in meetings to work out how do we take things to the next level. We have satisfaction surveys as well where that aspect, I must say, remains a feature, but it's not as high as when we started. And just in terms of my walking about, I can certainly see that for the in-house team, especially because we have our in-house team as well, the standards are improving. But again, I'm not going to pretend that the job's done. I think we have a long way to go, And again, I thank you all for your feedback to keep us honest on that front.
Thanks, James. And just to add, so residents know, the Residents Association holds a subcommittee meeting with the management team at the Lancaster West Neighbourhood Team. We have the internal refurb manager as well as the repairs manager. So if anybody does have any issues or comments they want to raise at that, you can email us at hello@lankwest.com. We meet every month towards the end of the month, and we can raise those issues with the management team. Next, we have Stuart. Stuart has another live question. Over to you, Stuart.
Hey, James. Yeah, sorry, I forgot to ask this today when I saw you earlier when I was waiting for you. In terms, because you've mentioned it, you've just reminded me. In terms of 50 Verity, is it still unoccupied? And because I've got a lady on Verity who would like to see it. Any of the open days, so she won't able.
In terms of a viewing of it, or wants to.
Yeah, in terms of looking inside and seeing the quality and the standard.
Yeah, we can sort that out, Stuart. Drop me an email. We have a new occupant for 50 Verity, former household resident of Clarendon Walk, but they'll probably be moving in around 3 weeks' time. So drop me an email with their details, and we can absolutely arrange a viewing of that. And we will be, for those who haven't seen 50 Verity, we'll be circulating or publishing, I should say, a range of videos that will basically allow you to go in it as if you're there. So we're also doing that to trial ways that people might find helpful to engage, because given the levels of decisions we're making and people are busy, that not everybody can take the time to come and have a look about, but absolutely, Stuart, I can sort that out for you.
Cheers, James.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. The next questions are from leaseholders. There's a couple of leaseholders who would like to know if they're able to buy into the kitchens and bathrooms program, and would it be at a discount?
So at the moment, we are focusing, notwithstanding where we are with noise and mess and all that sort of thing on our tenanted properties. But I absolutely would hope that in a year's time, we'll be looking at offering the opportunity for leaseholders, and probably, in fairness to most leaseholders, by that point we'll be clear on what the charges might look like. But I would love to give resident leaseholders the opportunity to buy in to our kitchen and bathroom programme. And in terms of the discount, it would be at the price of that we secure from our suppliers. There would need to be a management cost in terms of our time as well, which would be minimal in the scheme of things. So yes, it would be much cheaper than going to B&Q or Wickes's and buying a kitchen or bathroom yourself. So that's absolutely something I would look to be doing. But in terms of the scheme of things at the moment, it's not something that is an immediate priority. That said, it is something that we've been asked about, and it's absolutely the ambition that we get to offer that at some point.
Lovely, thank you. Will the refurbishment create some storage, like 2 by 2 meters in the garage area and some other places? So this is for a resident in the Walkways.
Yeah, I think I can guess who that might be. And I was talking to that resident, I believe, earlier on today. So yeah, so this is a really good opportunity to address the fact that it's all very well me as the big bad landlord saying, can you stop storing stuff in the communal areas, things like that. But you guys need to live here at a time where we're all locked down and all the rest of it. So definitely things like improving cycle storage would help. I think pram storage is something we could have a look at as well. I mean, with the walkways, we do have the complexities of its configuration and making sure that it's safe from a fire point of view, and we're undertaking smoke modelling to understand what we can and can't do in terms of the common areas. But absolutely, I would see an opportunity once we've agreed on the big ticket items, if you like, on what we can do to improve storage, either in the homes or around the homes. I don't think we'll necessarily be able to provide, I mean, we could look at it. I think in terms of the garages, I would be surprised if that would be agreed across the board as the best use of them, given we could potentially look at putting in new homes in there, in Hurstway and Testerton in particular. In terms of baseline, we're working closely with colleagues in the Town Hall's Economic Development Team to ensure that delivers a more front-facing benefit to the local community. But absolutely, in terms of various improvements that will make it a lot easier to live in and around your homes, that's something we'll look at. Similarly, in Treadgold, where you've got the pram sheds there, that's something that we would consider. In my experience, trying to negotiate people out of a pram shed is probably one of the hardest things to do in housing. But if that's what we need to do to try and maybe regenerate and improve that provision, then that's absolutely something we can do. But it would be typically something we'll do later down the line when we know the main configuration of the buildings and common areas.
Thank you. Next question. The initial ideas from Penrose Prasad, specifically for Clarendon Walk, show balconies added onto the windows. This block does not benefit from the grant money, meaning windows will be rechargeable to leaseholders. If balcony windows are added, will these be recharged, as this is an improvement?
Very good question. No, if balconies were to be added, hypothetically, I think the original drawings go back to the ideas days. We don't have funding to be adding balconies where there aren't any at the moment. I just want to be clear about that. But hypothetically, if we did, or if residents between you said we really want new balconies hung on or extended, then no, they wouldn't be recharged. The only way balconies would be recharged is if we were replacing like for like, which for Clarendon is obviously the brickwork and maybe the balustrades that you've already got. That would potentially be rechargeable. But if we were to hang balconies on a building that doesn't currently have them, same as with lifts for buildings that don't have them, that couldn't be recharged in the first instance. It does then become a building element. So down the line, when we were to replace it, so we're talking, 30 years plus, and probably with a balcony longer than that, then that would be recharged. But obviously, that's a very long way away.
Thank you. The next question is around the schedule. In this question specifically for Upper Talbot Walk, but I think it would be good for residents to know when the likely internal refurbishment plan is for each of the blocks, when they're likely to start. Is there a timeline that can be published to residents for each of the blocks?
In terms of the other blocks, yes. So that is, again, a common question. Just to take us back 6 months ago, we started with just our pilot properties, our individual pilot properties, in terms of in situ refurbishment and what that might mean and involve and the sorts of things to consider. We've scaled that up with Moreland House being our first pilot block. We're looking to scale up the works. We've had some issues there around, residents not ready to start and so on and so forth. What I don't want to do is publish a programme that immediately just falls to pieces because we're nowhere near. That's been done before, and in my watch that won't be done again. So we will move to a place where that's what we'll start doing, but as and when we're ready. So I think the next block we'll be looking at after Camborne Mews will be Verity Close in terms of the parts of the estate. The majority of refurbishment, I'd say 80%, has gone to the walkways. However, that's been to empty properties primarily, rather than to people living in the walkways already. So it's overwhelmingly saying we've had a lot of refurbishment in the walkways, but actually, if you've been living there at the time of tragedy, you haven't necessarily. So what we'll also do is, once we have a clearer picture in terms of the preferences and choices that people make as we move forwards, we'll be able to fold in the internal refurbishment. So some of the things like a mechanical ventilation heat recovery system are relatively intrusive. We're looking at sprinklers, for example, in the walkways. So we'll try and combine things together. So what we're doing is sort of locking in, if you like, elements of the programme in different blocks where it sort of makes sense and minimises disruption to do so. We could have just sort of done a mail out and said, hands up if you want a kitchen, but then we could be coming back in a year pulling it out, putting an internal wall insulation, and that's your money that's being diminished. So I realise that you want me to say, yes, by the end of this month, we will publish a programme, but at the moment, there are a lot of things up in the air to be decided. I'd imagine in sort of 3 months' time, we'll have a much better understanding of what people are choosing and how it all might fit together. And obviously, you'll be the first to know when we agree something. It's not the case that we agree something internally and hold it back. Often, I see, many of the officers of the RA on a daily basis. Many times they know before some of my staff do. So we will be as open and honest and transparent as we can, but in the fullness of time to make sure that all the various trade-offs make sense when we agree what block will be coming next.
Thank you. The next question is, this is more to do with the utilities coming into some of the blocks. At present, we have 3 sets of wires around the Mews. I'm guessing Camborne Mews, 2 for the TV and 1 for broadband. Is there a way of we can sort out the redundant wires? But that might be down to the individual suppliers, though. I'm not sure what.
Yeah, so the digital TV is for us as a landlord to resolve. The broadband, you're quite right, David, is usually a supplier. But yes, we can absolutely look at wires. We can look at providing multi-region digital TV, so we can get rid of all the satellite dishes. There's loads of redundant satellite dishes. Every time I see one, I try and get it taken down, all the rest of it, which will clean up the facade of the block and the aesthetics. So from an aesthetic point of view, all those things will be looked at. In the same way for the Camelford Walk roof, we're looking at the person safe, the fall prevention bars, which look like scaffold bluntly, and on a block as low as Camelford Court, look quite ugly. And so one of the things we'll be looking to do is replace that with a cable system where somebody would attach themselves to it if they were on the roof and having to do some maintenance. So all those little intricacies we will absolutely pick up, so that you haven't got things like wires trailing around. Obviously in the walkways, we're trying to take and remove gas provision. We're doing that in every void property, and we're doing that with the agreement of residents, because again, longer term, we want to move away from this sort of gas pipes, some of which are redundant, running along the walkways. So all of that stuff we would absolutely look to mop up.
Perfect, thank you. Next question. Choice is a good thing, but when residents do not agree on a course of action, what happens and how is the decision made?
It never happens here, does it? Yeah, so this is another thing we often discuss. So what we're trying to do is, where possible, agree or generate a consensus. And a good example of why that might be is that, interestingly, the Camelford Court roof project, where we took the decision to put out the 4 different options, or the 5 different options really, because one of the options is do nothing and just patch it up. Between putting in what we call a warm roof, so a highly insulated roof, a roof with a green roof on top of it, so it looked like wildflower in a meadow, a roof with PV, solar panels on it, and then finally the Rolls-Royce option, if you like, a roof with a green roof and PV on it, for various reasons. And there was like a 4-way split between those options, and there was all various reasons, from people concerned about being stung by bees, costs around PV maintenance and the green roof, people were believing that we would sell the electricity for profit and it wouldn't benefit the residents. And so we forced not necessarily a binary choice because there are 4 options, but we forced people to make a delineated choice there before we'd sat down and had the discussion. And what we're now doing is going through what residents have told us, coming back with a design that tries to address all of those issues, and hopefully that will build a consensus acceptable to the majority. So learning from that and learning from what we've done before, what we'll try and do is just ask people in a way where we're not boxing them into a corner, we're not boxing them into one side or the other, and then we'll infer and aggregate the data. Now, the target that we've set through the design stage, which will be, the weeks and probably next 3 months, to be honest with you, is that we engage with at least 50% of residents living in, or at least households in every block. So we've met that before. I'm looking at the open house results behind my screen now. So I know we can achieve that. We've already engaged over 100 people, and that's just through 3 webinars and 2 pop-ups. So I think we'll do our best to try and get a consensus, or a rough consensus. I don't think it will be the case that everybody will agree with everything. We need to engage legally with our leaseholders under the terms of Section 20 anyway, so they almost get 2 bites of the consultation cherry, if you like. But if we do need to get to a stage of a vote to choose between 2 choices, then we'll look at that. I'd far rather get to a place where we present a final design and ask residents to agree or disagree with that final design, having done the weeks and months of consultation. But if we can, avoid a situation where there's strong polar opinions one way or the other, I think that will be for the best. But we are also looking at various other ways that decisions have been made in extremely complex communities elsewhere. We've had some interesting conversations in terms of participatory democracy and decision making as well, including internationally actually, and we're looking at a range of ways to introduce those, certainly when we move to some sort of hybrid face-to-face environment, and we introduce a few of those approaches as well in the way that we prioritise the budget. 57.9 million as we had at the time, where many of you came to those sort of restaurant menu style selections. So often people think of choices like this as a case of voting, but we'll only introduce that if we really have to. We don't really want to pitch resident against resident.
Perfect, thank you, James. A relatively small matter, but being charged for window cleaning is outrageous, bearing in mind that windows and balconies were covered in debris after the fire. So RBKC have a duty to have it cleaned.
So deep cleaning as a result of the tragedy, none of that was passed on in terms of the sorts of things sort of referred there, cleaning of debris and all the rest of it. Certainly not in the time that I've been here. In terms of cyclical window cleaning, as per the terms of the lease, a leaseholder is required, as is a tenant, to pay their proportion of that. With tenants, it's mocked up as part of their rent. The vast majority of our leaseholders pay for their window cleaning. So the basis would need to be that people don't feel that the windows have been cleaned to the standard that they would expect, and we would recall the contractor there to address that. I think one of the frustrations, understandably, people have is when they pay for windows to be cleaned that aren't necessarily their own windows because they're unreachable, because they're on balconies and all that sort of thing. But again, I think a lot of that is around people not necessarily understanding the terms of their leases based on the conversations I've had with individuals. But if there's a particular issue around the quality, we can get the contractor back out and address that if that's been missed. I can see David O'Connell's got his hand up there. David.
Oh, has he? He's not appearing on my side.
Well, I am trying. Thank you, James. I was just going to say, when was the last time the windows were cleaned? Because I don't remember it happening. It's supposed to happen every quarter, yeah? I
think we moved it down to every 6 months. I checked when it was last done, mainly because people were complaining about the charges. So I can check that and come back.
I don't think it's been done for a year, as far as I remember, and it wasn't done very well the last time it was done. I mean, I'm talking specifically about the walkways, so I don't know if this is all across the estate. But I think the window cleaning is a bit of an issue, and if it is a large charge, I think that it probably needs to be a good quality service.
Yeah, Mario says that's the same case with Treadwell.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. So one of the things we're looking to do, and in fact we've got a consultation meeting for Lanc West, I think it's in 2 or 3 weeks. So my colleague Dennis Paul, the head of external services, we are now publicly, it's been announced, looking to bring our cleaning and caretaking services in-house. That will do exactly what it's done with our repair service. It gives us control over quality, over price. It means that if somebody's not happy with their window cleaning, well, one, we'll make sure it's happening, and two, if it's not, we can send people up to get it done. At the moment, the window cleaning is done by a subcontractor of our main contractor being OCS, and they subcontract out the window cleaning. So there's charges there which wind their way back to us. So I think with the cleaning and caretaking quality, that will improve a lot, and we're looking at to go live sort of September time. And so I think that will give us the control and flexibility. In terms of the window cleaning schedule, I'll ask for an update and I'll circulate that to RA officers, and we can disseminate that appropriately.
There's a comment that's just coming saying window cleaning never happened before the fire. I don't know if window cleaning was charged prior to the fire.
Yeah, so I obviously I wasn't working here before the tragedy. I can't comment on what did and didn't happen, but it's not the first time that someone said various services weren't delivered. All I can do is make sure that they are now, and if people aren't happy with them, make sure that we do all we can to change that.
Are you able to confirm which blocks actually do receive window cleaning?
All of them should. Which windows get cleaned, and that's another issue around what people can breach and abseiling and all the rest of it. So maybe one of the things we could do, if this is a live issue, is actually arrange a meeting to explain for each block which windows do get cleaned. One of the issues we had, which gives you an example of the issue around outsourcing, or one of the various issues, is the internal fan lights and the internally facing kitchen windows in the walkways. They were not cleaned, and the ledges underneath them were caked in dust. I remember when I arrived, and that wasn't part of the cyclical window cleaning, and the contract at the time prohibited that. And our OCS cleaners caretakers aren't allowed to work at height, and they're not trained. So we had to pay, and we didn't pass this on at the time, a good example, to get those cleaned as a one-off, because obviously you can't really expect a resident to be leaning over their sink and hanging out, cleaning those internally facing windows. These are also the ones with the fire curtains around them. So we are learning all sorts of anomalies that were just missed. I think having an in-house team will give us the control to do what's sensible as frequently as people like, but crucially to the quality, because you know, it's very common that people complain about the quality of window cleaning, and more to the point, the lack of it.
I think it might be worth looking, reviewing the schedule and actually which blocks are being done, because I can tell you from Verity, the flats aren't done, and certainly the houses. So I'm not sure if there are other blocks that are being missed. So it might be worth actually doing a review on that.
Will do.
Next question is regarding I'm guessing this is somebody that might be in either the Walkways or one of the Clarendon Camelford blocks. Would the step access when you're walking into your home be removed and have a flat service for easier walk into home instead of lifting your leg just to walk into your home?
Thanks, Hamza. Yeah, so that's something our design teams are exploring, particularly in, well, it's both the Walkways and Camelford and Clarendon. So there is, particularly on the Walkways, because they were initially built as externally facing, even though they're facing internally, if that makes sense. There's what's called a water bar, which is to stop, you know, doors rotting and thresholds rotting. So if there's puddles of water, they're usually water bars. They're pretty sort of, they're almost like girders, mini girders almost, running alongside underneath a front door. So they would be quite disruptive, noisy, and there would be a cost to it. It's not a prohibitive cost in some senses, but it's not something we would just say yes, we'll definitely do that, and there wouldn't be any other consideration. So we'll explore the options to do that, absolutely, in the fullness of time. Flat level access is absolutely one of the issues. So we've moved 41 households through the local lettings plan. We've still got over 40 to move, so about halfway through, halfway job done, if you like. 9 of those households need flat level access, because we've only got one lifted block at the moment in Treadgold House. We don't have that many properties that are flat level to get to. So as alongside lifts, we'd absolutely look at, can we look at thresholds, can we look at ramps? And equally, we'll look at, is there stuff we can do internally in the home so that people, you know, aren't having to go up and down stairs. So yes, that is something that's in scope. But I don't want to say at this stage that's something we'll commit to do for the reasons I outlined at the beginning of the answer.
Thank you, James. Just one comment. This is going back to something you were talking about earlier. Someone was saying they would rather that the works be done right rather than just fast. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You know, so in terms of the levels of funding, you know, we've secured north of 100 million. We've only invested in the 2.5 years I've been here so far, you know, with 27% of the estate refurbished, about 6.5 million. So we're not rushing the money out the door to say, oh, we've done the refurbishment, far from it. Absolutely, it's a balance of risks, and some residents, they want it done now, some residents, they want to take their time. So on the internal refurbishment programme question, well, I didn't add it, it will come back. So Moorland, Talbot, Camborne, if a resident says, I'm not doing it this year, COVID, whatever, we'll come back in a couple of years' time. So we'll work at speeds suitable to individuals where we can. Obviously, at block level, that's more or less impossible. But as much as we can, we'll try and meet those individual expectations. Thank you. There's been some works being done in Verity Close regarding the wall that surrounds the properties number 1 and 2. There's been some fencing put around it because it looks like the wall's coming apart. It's been up there for quite about 2 months now, and we've not seen anybody working on that. Would you be able to get that looked into? Absolutely. I've written a post-it note, yeah. Thank you. The last kind of question or / comment is that there's been a refurbishment of number 26 Camborne Mews. That's taken quite a while. We're saying over a year and has not yet been officially handed over. What's been the issues around that? I am not as close to the detail of 26 Camborne Mews. I think it sounds like it's one of our pilot properties. I'd have to look. So if somebody wants to email me or pop in or email the RA, I can look into the detail of that and respond to, I presume it's the resident living there asking the question. Yeah, so it's come through as an anonymous question. So if you'd like to email into hello@lankwest.com, we can forward that question on. There's no other questions that have come through on the Q&A, but is there any further news on the water bill refunds that the council are currently or were calculating? So there is a web page which we can share around when that will be issued. I know there's currently meetings, one this morning that someone in my team attended. So there will be more communication coming out, I think, in the next few weeks on that. Essentially, if people have debt on their rent account or service charge account, that will go against that first. I know it's quite a sizable amount of money for people who are here at the full period of charging, but that is something that's being looked at corporately rather than locally. But I can absolutely seek an update for any individual who would like to know what their expectation might be in terms of any refund, because I can imagine at the moment, given the economic hardship many of you are going through, that could be, you know, a sizable amount of money. So yeah, I'm happy to pick that up for anyone. Thank you. Adding on to that, do we know for residents that are either kind of in good keeping with their rent, will they get the option to have the refund placed onto their rent account or receive it in cash, kind of actually get the refund? Will there be a choice, or is it only going onto the rent account full stop? I'll have to find that out, actually. I mean, one way or the other, if people are in credit of their rent account line with a tenancy agreement, so usually 1 week in advance, many places just look at you above zero, that's fine. Then it would be refunded, absolutely. So I don't know if it would be cash, but certainly have a bank transfer or yeah, I can't imagine envelopes of money going around the estate. So
So I think, yeah, so one way or the other, yeah, that's not going to be something we're going to be looking to just offset arrears with or anything like that. That would go back to who's owed it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think many people that are kind of in good keeping or in credit with their rent account would like to see that cash back into their bank accounts.
Yeah.
Next question is, where is the idea for sprinklers in the walkways come from? The walkways were considered low to medium risk fire before Grenfell. This initiative is being viewed as an overreaction and is not very popular.
So the idea has come from the London Fire Brigade, who are the enforcing agency with regards to all matters to do with fire safety. A notice of deficiency has been served on the 3 walkways in question. Sprinklers are something that many residents have asked about and for. I can't comment on any fire risk assessments that were undertaken prior to the tragedy or who did them or the quality of them. But I will say that maximising fire safety is something that runs like a stick of rock through everything that we do moving forward, even when that's unpopular. So the bin chutes is a good example. So I know it's caused issues, but you know, it's the right decision to make those bin chutes as safe as we could do as soon as we could. However, it's also right that we look at ways to address the problems that causes. So with regards to the sprinklers, it's on the recommendation of the London Fire Brigade. So the building regulations require us through any refurbishment to leave the building as safe or safer at the point it was designed. The point it was designed, the atria were open, going back to the point around the common areas. By having atria, i.e. roofs, which mainly keeps the water out, or should do when the atria are working, as well as keeping an element of heating and so on, and stops risks of people slipping and tripping and ice and all the rest of it. So one of the options the LFB were suggesting was we could remove those roofs, but even then they said that it would require sprinklers to be installed. Now we are undertaking a number of pilots where residents can come and have a look. We're exploring, can we put sprinklers in leasehold properties, for example, where they might not want the disruption because, you know, we'll only pay for the sprinkler installation, which would be gifted, it wouldn't be charged for. Can that go on walls rather than in the centre of the ceiling and have to disturb asbestos and lamps and all that sort of thing? And we will invite residents in to have a look, especially at 411 now. 411 tests now open house, sort of 2.0 pilot property. Now what we have sourced is sprinkler duct work, which will actually fit within the height of the suspended ceilings, which for those of you living in refurbished homes, you've got at the moment. So in our open houses on our Instagram, you will see a lovely LED spotlights with a suspended ceiling that's about 90 millimetres. We've found sprinklers that will fit within that, so you're not going to have ugly trunk work running along or boxing and all that sort of thing. But yeah, so to answer the question, it's on the recommendation or the requirement, sorry, of the London Fire Brigade. To be clear, they can force everyone to move out. So this isn't just some sort of, I take the point around the knee-jerk bit, though personally I'd rather knee-jerk on fire safety than the opposite. But we are working with the fire brigade to come up with something as practical as possible, but sprinklers are something we've secured additional investment for the walkway, so that's not coming out of the main refurbishment budget either. So that's another concern. Is there a trade-off? And absolutely there isn't.
Thank you, James. If anybody else has any more questions, please do use the Q&A section or raise your hand if you'd like to speak to James. One just come in. Are the sprinklers just for the walkways? And I suppose if so, why?
Because of the configuration of the walkways. It's to do with it in the event that there is a fire in one of the flats, when the door is open for someone to get out, be rescued, or the fire brigade go in, smoke will come out. But potentially coalesce around the atria. So it's the same reason we put the ACO alarms in, which are now zonal. So there's a fire in one of the properties, the zonal alarm will trigger on the adjacent ones around the atria. So it's to do with the way that the building's being built. At the moment, we're only required to put the sprinklers in the walkways. We have secured, as part of the Grenfell Nursery development, a sprinkler tank which will go in the basement of Clarendon Walk. So in the event that we are required down the line, because building regulations may well change as a result of the inquiry, as we can imagine, or equally, if residents were to say, we really, really want the assurance of sprinklers and we would secure the investment to do so, that would help with the provision there. But in terms of the immediate requirement, it is only in the walkways we are required to install them. We are looking to install a plume mister system, which we've trialled at 14 Upper Camelford Walk, for those of you that have been to see it there. We're actually in the process of installing that in a couple of other properties where, for various reasons, people are living in a way that it may create a fire risk, or primarily for them, potentially for adjacent properties. And given where we are, and also I think it's the right thing to do, we're installing those mister systems in every room. And you can see those on our Instagram channel. They're called Plumis Auto Mist Systems. Even though it goes above and beyond what we're required to do by the fire brigade. So similarly, if there are individual properties that are not in the walkways that would want the peace of mind of that, that's something we can look to install as part of the internal refurbishment programme.
Perfect, thank you. And for the misters, if there are residents that are interested in the misters, say in any of the houses or flats, is that something that those residents could request as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're definitely something we would have a discussion about as part of that internal refurbishment programme. At the moment, we're sort of installing them on a risk-based approach. But that said, you know, we've got residents who are anxious, even though they don't fall into a category of a risk. From my point of view, if looking at installing those types of misters will mean that people feel more at home, and for them that is a successful refurbishment, it's certainly not something I'm going to be saying no to. And
have you found that they've been a good alternative to having a kind of like overhead sprinkler system?
So there's a lot of sector politics between sprinklers, the sprinkler sector, and the misting or the mister sector, if you like. And it goes back to the Hackett review in terms of building regulations and not just relying on them, and innovating, going beyond. So in terms of being compliant, at the moment, the mister could not replace a sprinkler system. So for the walkways, it has to be a sprinkler system. So we couldn't put a mister instead, just to be clear. But where building regs don't require us to put a sprinkler system, that allows us to put in a mister system, which is, you know, independent research has shown works. However, they haven't secured like a British standard kite mark, if you like, to be able to say, actually, you don't need a sprinkler, you can rely on the mister. So all of this is all up in the air at the moment. But in terms of the alternative of nothing, absolutely mister systems, and there's lots of demonstrations of that will provide that assurance. For someone who might be a smoker, they fall asleep in their armchair, that's the sort of, or they might be on the holding spectrum with a lot of paper in their properties, that sort of thing. So this is a sort of case where we're proactively looking to install them. But absolutely, if someone's really worried about it for quite obvious reasons, given where we are, I've got no objection to having that discussion with them.
And if there are any residents that would like to know more about the misting system, is there anything that we could forward on to them for them? Because you said there was some demonstrations. Is there something that we could forward on to them?
Yeah,
there's an action kind of thing.
Yeah, there's as I say, there's videos of it working on Instagram. It's called the Plumis Auto Mist System. If you pop that in Google, it will come up. In fact, I think there was a press release following the engagement we held at Clarendon Walk almost 2 years ago now. It's been a very quick 18 months, I think, but yeah, it was very well received by residents. They really liked it, and it's quite a slick, you know, sort of brushed steel plate to it as well, and yeah, it's quite high tech hence why it's quite at the cutting edge of things. But absolutely, it's something that we can be looked into. And as part of the internal refurbishment conversations, we would be able to show residents what that might look like.
Lovely, thank you very much. We don't have any more questions in the chat. So unless there's any other questions that come in, I think we can call that a night. Well, if anybody does have any last minute questions, please get them into the chat box or raise your hand. Oh, yeah, we do have one last one from Carl. Go ahead, Carl.
Unmute. This has been rather informative and very excellent meeting. I hope to attend many more. And have a nice evening. Goodbye. Thank
you very much, Carl. We definitely will be hosting more of these going forward, so we'll make sure that you get the invitations to attend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining.
See you next time.
See you. Have a good evening. Okay, so we have, I believe this is Stephen Montague. Go ahead, Stephen.
Leaseholder.
Hello. Will there be, I got to here a little bit late, will there be a summary of some of the issues raised today?
Yep, absolutely. So the meeting is being recorded. So if you want to watch the meeting back in its entirety, you're able to do that. Okay. I will actually be going through and putting in chapter points. So you can look at the question in the description and then click through to the answer. But there will also be a written summary of this as well.
Thank you very much. Yes, excellent.
Thank you. Stuart. Oh, sorry. I've done this. Go ahead, Stuart.
Hey, James. I missed the heating and hot water forum meeting the other day. Is there any update on that? On the decisions that have been made around that, the new heating and hot water system?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Stuart. What we're looking at, so most residents we speak to, they want to keep a form of district heating. And I suppose there's two or probably three aspects of a heating system. There's what we call the tertiary network, or basically your internal plumbing and radiators. The secondary network is what runs through the blocks and away from the plant room, and the primary network is the plant, so what generates the heat. So at the moment, 8% of the estate has got two gas boilers, if you like. Well, there's more than two in there, but there's two plant rooms, and then 20% are on gas combi boilers. Now, draft legislation in the form of the energy bill basically means that 10 years from now, gas will be phased out. That'll be a legal requirement. So what we want to do is avoid having to invest now in something like a better efficient gas system, and then in 5 to 8 years or 10 years, having to come back and rip everything out and replace it and structure all again. Similarly, with some of the things like the triple glazed windows, if we don't put them in now, at some point in the time, we probably will do. So with the heat network engagement, there's various surveys that loads of people have actually inputted in. There's a few focus groups as well. We are looking to bid for some grant funding. The council would potentially set up a what's called a special purpose vehicle, which would basically be, rather than you paying sort of British Gas or other providers for your heating and hot water, it would be that vehicle that you pay. It'd be non-profit making. The profit would go back into running the service or subsidising the heating and hot water. The current feasibility is looking like we'll be able to deliver heating and hot water, so it'd be cheaper than the status quo. To be clear, that's not necessarily cheaper than now, because we don't have individual meters. So at the moment, someone could run a shower all day and not pay anything more. So I want to be really clear that because of other legislation, will no longer be an option. But what we're looking to do is deliver something that will be cheaper than just keeping gas, if you see what I mean, and bringing individual meters in. And then that would benefit residents as well in terms of the clean energy, and it wouldn't have the fluctuations that you have with gas because of, you know, global fossil fuel prices, things like that. So there'll be quite a lot more engagement over the months ahead. We'll be looking to make a decision probably by around June if we're going to put in for the additional funding. And what we'll be looking at is an air source heat pump. So you'll see at Verity Close, we've got a small air source heat pump. We'd be looking at commercial size ones, potentially on the roof of the leisure centre, that would produce a great proportion of the heat. We could look to supplement that. We're testing with heat that can come from wastewater. It's not just sewage. Only 2% of wastewater is in fact sewage, but there's a lot of heat there, but that's quite innovative. There's a lot of things that we're looking at, but what we want to do is be able to say that for residents it's a good deal and gives you the stability, but also the control in your properties that you would want. And again, it would be down to residents in, say, blocks such as your own and very close to choose whether they would want to join Lancaster West heat network or whether they would hang on to their gas boilers for a little bit longer.
Just to follow on that, James. So obviously, with this new heat source, where you'll need internal pipes. Is this being done as part of the refurb, the internal refurbs in the properties you've done?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So when we're doing full refurbishment of voids, full refurbishment of homes people live in, we're using that as an opportunity to replace all the pipe work, all the rad. Absolutely, we're making sure they're future-proofed. Obviously, things change fairly rapidly, but we have regular meetings between our internal refurbishment team and our main refurbishment team to make sure that it's all joined up, so that what we're putting in doesn't have to then be taken out and replaced with something else. So, for example, 70% of households now have the new unvented cylinders, as well as being on the district heating system. They'll be able to keep those, as well as what we'll put in for those properties that have still got the original Harton units, or hot water tanks, as people call them.
Okay, cheers, James.
Thanks.
Thank you, Stuart. We don't seem to have any more questions, so I'm going to pass over to Abbas for a few closing statements, and then we will wrap up for the evening. So Abbas, over to you.
Yeah, thank you everyone for giving up your time and joining this Q&A. Please make sure next time you ask your neighbors to join as well. The more people participate, the better it is. We need to up the game and make sure more residents are participating, especially with the consultation about refurbishment. That's all. Have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Abbas. Thank you, James, for your time this evening, and thank you everybody else for joining. Hope you all found this informative. This recording will be going up on YouTube, and we'll send out a note with the link if you want to watch it again, if there was anything that you missed, and we'll also be posting the write-up as well. So thank you again, everybody, and I hope you enjoy, have a good evening. Thank you very much.